We're going to tell a heck of a story here today on the Exam Room Podcast, brought to you by the Physicians Committee, of a gentleman who I don't know of anyone else in the history of ever who has quite walked the path that he is walking. He is Jim Greenbaum. He is a huge friend of ours here at the Physicians Committee. And sir, I don't even know how to introduce you, because you just have perhaps the most unique story I've ever heard in my entire life. But I will start just by saying, man, it is a pleasure to have you here.
The pleasure is mine. I'm disappointed I don't get to see the pink outfit from yesterday, but I tried to figure out what to give the guy that has everything, and since you're wearing green, I figure this might go well with
No way!
these socks.
Check it out. We got panda socks with the green. I'm going to wear these with pride. We're going to Instagram these for sure. Yeah.
And
well
since I
done.
wasn't sure what color you'd be wearing today, I had a backup plan, which you're welcome to take for other projects.
We got double pandas.
Double pandas.
Okay. We're gonna put these up at the Exam Room on Instagram so you guys can see this. But I'll hold this up. Panda, panda, panda. That is. Thank you, Jim.
You're quite welcome.
That is amazing. We're just gonna put those right there for the rest of the interview. Jim Greenbaum coming through. I like this guy. But you're going to fall in love with them now because of your story. You were just telling me before we hit the magical record button that you are already retired from the corporate world. You left the business world 20 some odd years ago. And you now are just entering an age when most people are retiring. What made the decision, what drove you to the decision to leave that behind so early?
Essentially, when I first went into business in my early 20s, the goal was to make as much money as quickly as possible to use it to change the world. I was debating what to do, the political route, philanthropy route. Wasn't quite sure, but so proceeded in business, failed a bunch of times until I finally did it right. Then in my early 30s, I was watching a newscast, I think it may be an NBC News Nightline or something like that, of a guy in Ohio that was going to Romania and getting kids out of these horrible orphanage conditions. And it dawned on me, my business was always already very successful at that point. So I said, when am I going to actually do something with my life versus telling everybody, oh, I'm just trying to make money to do it. So I said, I'm 32, 33. You spend 20 years growing up, 20 years in the business world, then out. So I said, okay, I'll give it till age 40 and leave then. Went and told my associates and business partners, said, hey, got about 7 more years left and I'm out of here.
You gave them 7 years notice?
Yes.
What, did they think you were serious when you?
Yeah, I told them I was very serious. And
okay.
The year before I left, we actually were in the middle of figuring out how to transition the company so I could do it.
Yeah, most people give 2 weeks. You gave 7 years. What line of work were you in?
The company I did well in was telecommunications, long distance services. But that was back during the day where we could actually charge you per minute for making long-distance calls versus it now being free to everybody.
Gotcha.
So I got out at the right time.
Yes, you did. You definitely cashed out at the right time. But did you always, growing up, have this desire to do good in the world? I mean, it sounds like you had that 20-year work plan and then, go and be philanthropic. So what compelled you to really try to change the world from such a young age?
In looking at it, I think I came out of the womb always fighting injustice and inefficiency. Those are the two things that just drive me crazy to this day and always. So
what were some of the problems that you had kind of identified from early on that you wanted to rectify?
Well, as a young child, I'd see I'd get in trouble with my parents. I'd argue. My siblings would get in trouble. I would argue their case in front of my parents why they shouldn't be in trouble. In the end, they wouldn't be in trouble. I'd be in trouble for arguing. Growing up in Louisiana, our parents would say, you'll respect your elders. Here this, 6 or 7-year-old said, I'll respect my elders if they deserve respect. I may show respect, but not necessarily respect. Didn't go over too well.
Yeah.
So bumping heads and the racism I saw in the South, it was a lot there. So I was combating that many times. And originally was looking at maybe going to law school and getting involved in maybe civil rights law.
Yeah.
And the last minute, applied to law schools, top-tiered schools, Harvard, Yale, Stanford. Thank you very much. They all turned me down. A couple of other good schools did say yes, but in the last minute, I decided right before classes began, the heck with this. You need a lawyer, hire a lawyer. Let me go into business instead and make money that way, and then use that money to change the world.
And let's not sugarcoat this. On your website, you put this figure out there, so I don't feel too bad asking you this question. When you say that you did quite well, how big of a fortune did you amass?
When we sold the company, the net worth was approximately about $133 million.
133. Clearly
it's not that way anymore. It just keeps going down, down, down.
Well, it's because you've been, giving back as you had planned to do. That's an incredible figure. What are some of the things that you have been doing with that 133 million? Did you immediately go and try to identify, as you saw on that Nightline special those years earlier, did you go into like improving child orphanages in foreign countries? What did you do first with that money?
The year before I actually left my company, I spent a lot of time online just reading all the news stories I could, learning what's happening in the world. If you want to change the world, you need to first figure out what's going on in the world. And I really was trying to find the areas, the most suffering, the most need, where I could make the most difference. Kept looking at different projects, wasn't sure where I would start, and then a friend of mine who knew I was searching said, Jim, I met these people you should probably talk with. And it was two young women that were creating an organization called Kids Save, or Kids Save International, was getting older kids out of horrible orphanage conditions in the former Soviet Union and getting them placed for adoption in various countries. And I met with them, looked at the project, debated, is this where I want to jump in or not? And I realized I got to start somewhere because I wasn't sure where to start. And it was close enough to the issue on orphanages. I said, why not? So I jumped in both feet and got heavily involved with them at the start. And it wasn't long after that that I'm on a site visit in Moscow with them and meeting with people in these orphanages. And the administration found the horrible conditions, the suicide rates, 10% within the first 2 years after the kids get out.
The kids in the orphanages, they would get out and
they get out at age 16, and there was like a 10% suicide rate. A high percentage of the guys end up in criminal activity, the girls in prostitution. It dawned on me, hey, big brother, big sister kind of program. Why don't we implement something like that so they have a network when they get out? And so I helped set that up. It wasn't long after that I heard about human trafficking, and this would be back around 1999, 2000, before it was all over the media, and I was horrified, and then immediately transitioned and started working heavily in that area, and that was my primary focus for about 10 to 12 more years, was working on human trafficking, and combating human trafficking.
But that was just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, you went around and you helped out so many different places, but then you also got into animal rights, animal advocacy, and I think that's probably how you popped into the world of a plant-based diet and got introduced to the Physicians Committee. Would that be correct?
Little twisting around in a different way.
All right, give it to me.
Started with the human rights areas, human trafficking, slavery, female genital cutting, mutilation, child marriage issues, gender-based violence, Middle East, North Africa. When Ebola came around, I had several projects in Liberia at the time. I reached out to find out how they were handling it. I wasn't thrilled with the responses, so I jumped in, spent about 6 to 8 months doing nothing but work on Ebola when that was happening. Then jump ahead about 14 years ago on the vegan journey. There I was at the gym working out one day, and growing up in Louisiana, we've got the worst diets at any place in the country, if not the world. If it didn't have Crisco in it, it wasn't food. So Crisco and meats, that was everything, and
right.
Coca-Cola.
Right.
So my friend, typical vegan at the gym, she asked, do you have any health issues? Do you take any medications? I said, yeah, I've got a family history of heart disease. I've got all the markers, high triglycerides, high cholesterol, taking medication for both. And she said, those medications are horrible for you. Just change your diet. Read this book, The China Study. I said, you're full of shit. I mean, that's a hippie diet. You're crazy. Well, she kept nagging, Deanna Bramble, and finally she got the book for me. I started reading it. The science seemed really sound. I said, okay, let me try this out. Went and checked my blood, stopped the pills, changed my diet, checked the blood again a month or two later. First time in my life, everything went into total balance. I was sold, boom, I'm going vegan.
Wow.
And so that was great. And after that, started going to some conferences, meeting other people, and within a couple of years realized, as most of us do, If the world went plant-based, it solves 70% of the world's greatest problems and leaves trillions of dollars left over to solve the rest. So over the last 7 or 8 years, I've actually transitioned where our foundation now has a very small component of projects in the human rights area that were legacy projects that we're still phasing out. The rest is all focused on moving the world to plant-based diets and vegan lifestyles.
Do you think that there could be some sort of a trickle-down effect with your new endeavors here with the foundation, and that's still somehow benefiting those legacy projects that are being ramped down? Do you think that there would be a trickle-down effect?
As far as trickle down, I'm nagging and working with and trying to get those other organizations to incorporate more plant-based nutrition in their programs. One of them, Toast On, my favorite organization in the world as far as work that they do as far as changing social norms. They've been in probably 8,000 to 10,000 villages already throughout Africa with their program, is getting to incorporate this module in on nutrition. We're working on it as you speak.
What are some of the things that you've seen in the health arena that really opened your eye beyond just, your own numbers and the improvement that you saw personally? But what are some of the biggest challenges that you see that we're facing that really weren't even on your radar until you started down this path? And then when you heard about them, you're like, holy crap, that is insane.
Well, the one thing back in part of the vegan journey, my whole life, even as a young kid, it bothered me they were eating animals. And at the 5th or 6th grade, they're teaching about various species and mammals and reptiles, and you're hearing pigs and cows are mammals like we are, and I'm thinking, well, we're eating something that's really close to us. That sort of seems wrong. But I bought in what Melanie Joy refers to as normal, natural, and necessary. And so it wasn't until I made the change that I was finally able to realize, wow, the suffering that's been caused by the death of all these animals. The statistic that stands out to me that still just almost brings me to tears every time, the number of land-based animals that we kill every year for food in the world, which is approximately 85 plus billion. Mm-hmm. That's B with a billion. Mm-hmm. Literally almost as many as the number of humans that have walked the planet since the beginning of time. Mm. That 2 to 3 trillion fish a year. It's just the suffering on the planet and life for the animals and human life because of the consumption of these animals, how unhealthy it is for us. It just solves everything. It's one of the few things that solves so many problems. I can't really put my finger on there. There's one area I've learned about or another area that hit me more. In fact, I've been an executive producer on quite a few documentary films, and people say, well, gee, you have so much knowledge in these areas. I say, well, most of it is the statistics you're hearing in these documentaries. I'm just remembering a lot of them.
Yeah. I mean, those numbers, that you just threw out there just are mind-boggling. They're almost hard to comprehend. 85 billion, and then you're talking trillions of fish. And I don't think that it takes a rocket scientist for somebody to surmise there that those numbers are completely unsustainable. And yet every year we go through them time and time again. What's the end game? Where does that end? It ends in doom. I wish I could paint a rosy picture, but if you keep going down this path, completely unsustainable, and we're screwed. We're screwed.
I agree. And something I challenge other vegans to do, something I did about 2 months ago one day, is I sat down and tried to calculate how many animals died over my lifetime because I was so ignorant for so long. And it's over 8,000 animals. It just, to this day, I feel horrible.
8,000 that you consumed? Is that the number that you came up with?
The number I came up with approximately around 8,000.
Wow.
Which is horrendous, and there's no way to make up for that.
Man, let me ask let me actually turn and look at you for this one. I just want to get to know who Jim Greenbaum is here because you were so successful in business, and when you're talking about $133 million, the picture that the majority of people think of when it comes to that level of wealth, that success in business is greed. How is it that you were able to avoid those pitfalls and be so generous with your time, your affluence, your just drive to help, whereas other people go down a much different, darker path?
I was always driven to make change and to make money, to use it for change. However, as far as consumption goes, that in itself has been a journey. The moral dilemmas I face most of my life, is it okay to spend this much money on something? When I sold my company, I had a business partner that was into buying airplanes, and he was making money on it because they would charter it when we weren't using it. So I finally went in with him on a private jet, and charters weren't that great. And I realized my time's not that valuable. It's like, no, I just can't rationalize that. I used to live in a huge home when I was in the San Diego area on a lot of land. And even though I would always tell people that would come over to the house that I give more money away every year than I'm spending on living. And I always felt embarrassed because my home was so large. And when I would meet nonprofits I was working with, let's go to a Starbucks. I wouldn't bring them to the home. That always troubled me. And about 7 years ago, I moved to LA area, got rid of the huge home, downsized, still driving my, in fact, at one point in time, I had several sports cars. A decade or so ago, started phasing out of that. And then I moved to LA, and I've got, much smaller home, less than a quarter of a size home from what I was living in, and very small parcel of land compared to where I was. Drive my Toyota, gosh, I went blank on the name of it.
Prius?
Not Prius, not
RAV4?
RAV4.
Yeah.
Love my RAV4.
Yeah, man. You got
great.
the Prime hybrid. That's what my wife and I have, half electric, half regular combustion engine.
When I went to the store 7 years ago to get a car, I was going in to buy the hybrid.
Yeah.
Got out, got home, out of the car, and I realized, wow, what a great deal I got on the car. Oh my God, it wasn't the hybrid. I'm like shocked. So over the years, I kept looking at going back and going to the hybrid or all electric. I'm driving so little these days, 3,000 to 4,000 miles a year.
Oh, wow.
That it just hadn't made any sense. The car just normally sits there most of the time.
Right. What's the point? Man, that's just incredible to me. And you get to go, I would imagine. I mean, you have seen a lot of the world. Let me ask you just kind of a travel question. When it comes to healthy eating, where would you rank the U.S. in terms of just access to high quality, healthy food, where it's kind of normal to be eating that way?
I have no clue. Most of the travel I've done over the last 2 decades has been for the projects that I work on.
Gotcha.
Which means I spend a lot of time in places in Africa where the scenery is not the scenery that you normally go to Africa to see, and the villages or remote areas that are not the most fun areas. So no idea the answer on that. Looking forward to do more recreational travel down the road, but that hasn't been the fate lately. But even in the United States, one of my kids was in school, I think in Prescott, Arizona at one point, several years ago, and I went down there when I was seeing him. You couldn't find a vegan option anywhere at any of the restaurants. I mean, you couldn't even get a salad that they could do vegan. It was unbelievable. You end up finding a grocery store and just getting a few things there. So, food deserts around this country, there are pockets where, in LA, I'm in West Hollywood, we're spoiled. I mean, I'm in walking distance to probably 5 or 6 of the top vegan restaurants in the country, walking distance from my house.
Yeah. You know what blows my mind is we live in this well-developed nation, one of the leaders of the free world, and there are pockets of the United States where people have to organize bus trips just to get to a grocery store. We're not talking about going anywhere fun or luxurious for a vacation. We're talking about chartering a freaking bus to go to get groceries because all they have access to within walking distance is a 7-Eleven, a convenience store, a Quickie Mart, something like that, where it's nothing but junk food, nothing fresh, maybe a couple of pieces of fruit, but that's not going to tide you over. That doesn't have everything you need. So the families that really want to try to eat healthy have to move heaven and earth to get there. And that to me is just unfathomable and just a shame. It should not be happening in a country like the United States. It is mind-numbing to me that happens.
And another interesting fact I came across more recently, but you probably have more knowledge on this than I do, I would assume. And I'm not sure if my facts are right, but apparently, everybody wants to have the fresh produce at the stores, which is great to have nice, good-looking fresh produce. But apparently, the flash frozen items that you can buy at the store that are packaged, and some of the canned goods that are packaged immediately, as soon as the items are picked, there's actually more nutrients there than in the fresh vegetables, which have sat on trucks in warehouses for a period of time before they reach you.
Yep, true. Especially with the frozen fruits. I mean, because they're picked and then with the hours they're frozen. Whereas if you're transporting them fresh, the stuff that you're eating was picked probably at least 7 days ago, sometimes longer, even when you're talking about leafy greens. And, that to me is just, it's always marketed as freshly picked just off the farm to table. It's like, yeah, farm to table after 2 weeks. And there's a huge difference in the flavor. I actually find with some of the frozen stuff, it's more flavorful than the fresh, non-frozen produce that you would get, which is a whole other jam. And that's the big buy local movement. But out in LA, I would imagine there are quite a few delicious farmers markets where you can get the ultra fresh yum yums.
This is true.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But as far as the plant-based movement, we're always pushing so much about having enough access to the fresh produce throughout the country. Maybe we should take a step back and realize if we get the proper frozen items to those stores and the proper canned goods, that actually is a great start and plenty of nutrition. Not that we should neglect getting the good produce as well, though.
Sure. Does the idea of maybe trying to figure out how to do that appeal to the old businessman in you? Like a problem solver? How can we scale this to make it efficient?
To scale things and do them efficiently, I try to find other people with the capabilities, say, hey, if you thought about this, and eventually somebody say, yeah, let me go work on that. So it's not going to be me doing it.
No, not you. That's not Jim's next paper.
To do philanthropy full-time, it's a full-time job. People say, oh, you're retired now. I say, hey, business was easy. At some point, making money is easy. You want to challenge, try come changing the world.
Yeah.
And one of my big frustrations over the years has been I've tried to encourage more other high net worth individuals to go into philanthropy and do it full-time. And so many of them, they set up foundations and they hire other people to do all the work for them and they don't do anything. They say, fine, they're giving it away. But what I tell them, oftentimes more so than the money they can give, the talent and skills they had to make that money, we need that to help solve these problems.
So what's next for you? What's the next big problem? Like here in the plant-based community, where's the foundation focused now? What are some specific projects that people should be on the lookout for?
We've got over 150 projects right now, organizations that we're funding, doing work in around 90 countries throughout the world. And we're doing 1 or 2 or more new documentary films every year as well. So I see just continuing on that path.
Yeah.
The only exit I could see is when and if the cultured meats do meet price parity and quality parity, within 10 or 15 years after that, I would estimate that 85% of the meat that people consume will be coming from the laboratory or lab-grown meats. And within another 15 years or so after that, it'll probably become illegal in most countries to kill animals for food.
Which theoretically puts that in our lifetime still.
And if that does happen, great. I'm back on human rights track again.
Right
you
on.
don't need me over here, but for right now, this is where I'm needed.
That's where your focus is, absolutely. Just out of curiosity, when did the Physicians Committee first pop on your radar?
It would be not long after I went plant-based. I came across them at a conference, I believe, and hit it off with Neil and loved the work you guys were doing, and eventually found about the work you're doing in China, so I said, let me help fund that, and been delighted to help with the work there. That's
amazing, like how many people attend the events that we organize. Zhao over there in China, like the work that he's doing is amazing. Like I had no idea how much of a keen interest there is in health and plant-based eating over in China. But I'm sure, you've seen the numbers. He's drawing like tens of thousands and if not hundreds of thousands of people routinely to watch his online webinars. And then his bike trips across the country and making all of these local stops and getting the face-to-face time. I remember speaking with him about that early on in the pandemic and was just like, you're doing all this? He's like, yeah. And it was like, that is a really neat approach. I would love to see somebody do that here in the U.S., to be honest with you. That's amazing stuff, man.
He's done phenomenal work. Another project I came up with several years ago, in fact, I was at a PCRM event in Los Angeles, a one-day event. A lady sitting next to me was a second-year medical student. She was vegan, and I said, well, are there many people that are vegan that entering your medical school class? She said, no, maybe 1 or 2 per year at most. And I said, well, do you talk with other medical students about plant-based nutrition and how it can help in medicine? She said, oh, yeah, occasionally we'll have get-togethers at my place, and students will come over and we'll discuss the issues, read one of the books, talk about it, or watch one of the movies. I said, how do you get them there? And she said, oh, just, I feed them. So it dawned on me and ended up setting a program. It's called the Taste of Lifestyle Medicine Program. I believe it's being run by ACLM right now. where there are micro grants, $50 up to $250 to cut for any medical student to be able to host a small group of other students and talk about plant-based nutrition. That will cover the alcohol and food costs for them.
Nice, look at you.
So my view is, since they're not getting the training in medical school, find the people that are already vegan entering in medical school, let them do outreach to their other classmates, bypass the formal education side.
Yeah.
And hopefully we can get a lot more physicians being plant-based when they graduate.
Man, that's so important. I was just speaking with Ocean Robbins about that yesterday. He was asking about, what could be different. And that was one of the things I said is like, look, you're not going to be able to change anything in terms of like health and the future of medicine until you start incorporating nutrition into the curriculum. And it wasn't until I started doing this show and getting more involved with the Physicians Committee that I understood that there is zero nutrition education among doctors. And that makes it terribly difficult to change the direction that we're headed.
Worse yet, in conversation I've had, my understanding is the medical schools, when you talk to administrations about incorporating more modules in plant-based nutrition in medicine, the response is we only can offer so many courses because there's only so many hours of lecture time and available for the students. And they said, if we put that in, we got to take something out, which blows my mind. No, the answer isn't to put in a module on this. It's that every other module should have a component in it about plant-based nutrition, how it affects it, versus, here's the medications you need for that. Well, or plant-based nutrition should always be the first option.
I'll tell you, the one thing that I do take solace with is the belief that the upcoming generation of doctors who do see value in nutrition are asking questions, and they are pushing to incorporate some of these. And I feel like the dots are starting to slowly be connected for this younger upcoming generation. So hopefully, by the time I get ready to leave this world, we will see a more prime focus on healthy eating, lifestyle medicine incorporated into every practice, because you do that, healthcare expenditures, just boom, they plummet. If you have, and it's a fact, we've said it on the show, Jim, 18 gajillion times that 80% of heart disease cases, deaths, are preventable. The leading cause of death. So if you take 4 out of 5 of those deaths off the table, imagine the cost savings for everybody. And as you look at it philanthropically, where would that money go? What good could we do in this world? A lot.
Well, I'm curious, with all the people you've interviewed and your perspective, having seen so much, do you have any ideas of things that we should be doing different in the movement, or something we should be doing that we're not doing to help move the world to plant-based diets on a faster scale?
I think that the key is to reach outside of our plant-based circles. It's really easy once you get in this bubble, and I love the exam roomies, and I want to continue to grow this community, but I feel like we need to look outside of our walls, and it's so easy to get comfortable being operating in the space where everybody already understands, and they just, easy to regurgitate facts. That's wonderful. We need to find the right people to be able to reach outside of that and tap into what drew us into this community in the first place. And once you can reach that broader audience, that's when you can really start to see that shift. And I don't know if it takes celebrities. I don't know if it takes more personal testimonials, shows like The Exam Room, whatever the case may be. But what I do know is we need to go back to that day that light bulb came on for each of us. Think about that. Think about what that moment was, what that idea was that really made you say, son of a gun, I have been wrong my entire life. I need to do this. And then apply that to other people, because you were outside the bubble at that point and something changed your mind. So what was that something? Tap into that something and bring people in.
Well, you just touched on something, one of my pet peeves in this movement. A lot of people, when they first go plant-based or vegan, they're frustrated and hurt when they see all the suffering the animals go through, and it pushes them to be angry. And you'll see them out there in protest, yelling at people, screaming at them with this anger and hurt that they feel. The reality is, anybody that's ever been in a close relationship knows if you've got a partner that's yelling at you, what do? Are you listening intently to what they have to share with you? Or you're saying, hey, back off, I'm not hearing a word you're saying, I don't like being yelled at. The only way, were it not for education and X amount of time, we were them. You're not going to change an opinion on somebody without empathy and education. No yelling, no getting in somebody's face. It's empathy and education.
Yep.
And I wish we could get that message out more in our movement to have a more gentle approach.
Yeah. I agree.
Persistence is good, but, gentle.
I mean, and that's the thing. Like, I understand the reason for the rage. I understand the anger. I absolutely do. But as you just said, think about any argument you've ever been in, whether it's with a spouse, a significant other, a friend, a family member, it doesn't really matter. Nobody likes being yelled at. So when you go to those extremes and you're on the bullhorn and you're up in somebody's face and you're just giving them the riot act, every word that you say, even if it is 100% fact, 100% correct, is in one ear, out the other, if you even get that far.
Right. I mean, I've been to horse races before where the people are protesting out front. The reality is, most people that you would ask that are attending horse races would probably tell you they love horses, and they probably do.
Yeah.
They don't understand the suffering that's going on. So when you're yelling at them that, hey, this is horrible, this, that, they're not getting the message.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. I have a friend of mine. He's a sports reporter. He, for many years, actually covered horse racing, and he saw some of the stuff online, and he just approached me, and he's like, man, there's two sides to all of these stories. You hear about all of these atrocities, but what you guys are missing is the fact that these trainers, these owners, genuinely love these animals. And even though they're going at it with the wrong approach, there is still a lot of love there.
Right.
And that makes me think that, wow, if the protesters weren't out there, like really angrily yelling at them and being so combative and confrontational, maybe if it was just like a more gentle approach, a healthier dialogue, that then could really start to make some changes occur.
I mean, you look back on the protests of the 60s, what do we remember more fondly? The people at the sit-ins with the flowers versus the people violence.
Absolutely. Just sitting at the lunch counters.
In fact, when you talk about reaching out to other groups, it reminded me, several years ago, I was having a conversation with Gloria Steinem, and there was some women's conference coming up, and I asked her if she was going to attend. She said, oh, Jim, no. I don't want to go to places where people agree with me. I want to go to the conferences where nobody agrees with me, and I can change minds.
That's just it. And you go in there, and you're happy, you're professional, you're not combative, you just have conversation. You make new friends. I don't think it needs to be any more difficult than that.
Exactly.
I really don't.
And since I'm also involved in a bunch of documentary films, I'm curious if you have any ideas of something we haven't covered yet in the space. We've got about 7 in development right now. But
do you? I mean, so for me, my story is all about food addiction, and I love opening the eyes of people when it comes to just, how powerful food can be and how it can go toe-to-toe with drugs and alcohol, and in a lot of cases, even be more powerful. Like, it was all-consuming. And so when you're talking about something like, I bet you can't eat just one, and they make it fun, and, just kind of like showing people the magic of marketing, when it comes to an unhealthy product and how we all get sucked right in. But because it gets so normalized, we don't understand what it's doing for our health and how we get hooked and how it's just destroying us from inside out. That is my passion. Like, I could talk to you for days about food addiction and being hardwired and spending all of my money at fast food restaurants and being completely out of control, being able to quit smoking way easier than I was able to quit Taco Bell, for instance.
So think it through more. So to your audience, what do you think? Chuck starring in a film about food addiction?
Oh, I'm game. Let's we can workshop that.
Let's definitely
we can workshop
play with it
that.
so you come up with. If you guys have ideas, send it to this guy.
It's at Chuck Carroll WLC, Twitter, Instagram. Well, I think it's called X these days, Instagram, Threads, wherever, or Chuck at theweightLossChampion.com, whichever. But that information needs to get out there. We're talking a lot about food addiction, but you hear those two words put together, and we've seen books, but I don't think that the full patient experience has truly been told. And every time I just bare my soul and I share that story with people, like, it almost moves me to tears. Like the feedback that I get from people, like, oh my God, I thought I was the only one. Mm-hmm. I thought I was the only one.
No, and I've learned over time, I do not have a sweet tooth, even though I love desserts. I acknowledge I have a full-blown sugar addiction. If I have a pint of ice cream in my fridge, vegan ice cream, of course, if I go in to have one spoonful of it, I will eat the entire pint every single time. Mm-hmm. I've had a time where one of my kids was, staying with me in a guest house behind my property. Middle of the night, I'm hungry, there's no more ice cream. I snuck into where he was, went to the freezer, took the ice cream out and ate it, the one I'd bought for him. That's horrible. So I try not, basically, I have willpower. If I don't take the first spoonful, I'm okay. So generally, I just don't bite. If it's not in you come in my freezer, it's really boring these days.
Oh, well, that's a wise man. Out of sight, out
but
of mind.
But I will, at a conference like this and food's around, I'll enjoy a little here and there.
Yeah, We'll workshop. We'll workshop. I hope that you're going to be at the panel that I'm going to be on here as we record this in just a couple of hours. I'll walk you through just how severe that addiction is. And then it ties in also the discussion we were having about there not being nutrition education in the medical school curriculums either.
Yes.
And how quite literally one day I was prescribed a hamburger, right? I was prescribed a hamburger. So let that sink in.
One of my closest friends growing up, they own the McDonald's franchise in northern Louisiana.
Uh-huh.
During the summers, every day, we'd go by and we'd get our free quarter pounder with cheese, the fries, the other food.
Yep.
And my other friend, he was working across the street. Hey, Mark. At Wendy's. Now a very accomplished lawyer, done huge things. But, so we'd go over and get the Frosty over there. I had the Louisiana diet. It was not a good thing.
Think nothing of it. You think nothing of it at the time. It's so normalized. But that's a show for another day. But man, I love your story. I love everything that you've been doing to help so many people in so many arenas. And we've got a link to your foundation in the show description and in the episode notes. So check that out. And thank you, Jim, for the socks. Amazing. Panda, panda, panda. You're the man.
It's my pleasure.
A lot of fun, man. And you got through it without swearing, except once. So well done, bud.
Well
done.
You did well. You almost won.
Almost. Anyway.
That was good.
Jim, thanks, my friend.
My pleasure.
If your health IQ was a couple of points higher than it was a few minutes ago, go ahead and like this video or subscribe to the YouTube channel. And to take it even higher, head over to Apple Podcast or wherever you get your favorite shows. Look for The Exam Room by the Physicians Committee. Hit the subscribe button there as well and help to make your world a healthier place.